Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News with the two boys with their orange hats on tonight. Hi, Chewy.
Hey, man.
How are you?
Part of a gang now. Orange Hat Squad.
So the funny thing is, in my heyday, I'd take my orange hat off and there'd still be an orange hat on, and you've still kind of got that now. So we've sort of both got that a little bit. Yeah, it's a funny story about this hat, actually. I am, as you know, a bit addicted to hats. And I like my 5950 hats. That's these ones. They're 5950s. That's what the symbol on the side is. And they're all fitted, so I don't get clipped ones. My head size, because I got a big old fat head, is 7 7/8. So I see it says that number there, right there, 7 7/8. Mm-hmm. So this hat's 7 7/8. It's a minor league baseball team, and it turned up and it was too small for me. And since losing 63 kilos, my shoes are now a bit too big for me, and my hat that was too small for me now kind of fits my head. It's bizarre, man.
So you're saying you had a big fat head as well?
Yeah, I had a fatter head. And now some of the hats that I'm wearing are a bit too small for me, and I've spent freaking money on those. And this one that was too small. Actually, I don't know. I wore this the other night and I took it off because it started to hurt a bit. It's probably still a teeny bit too tight, but I couldn't even get it on before. And look, check this. See this? My wristwatch? I've gone in 3 buckles. So even every part of me is going, including my head and my feet. It's a bizarre thing. It is completely bizarre.
Nice. I'll worry about you in the upcoming winter without your thermal insulating layer.
I might blow away at some stage. I'm worried about that. Anyway, let us say hello and kia ora and good evening and welcome. Oh, look, we won't do that one because we can't see our logo. Let's do that one instead. In fact, there's another one here as well, which won't work for this, and we can do that one as well. Should we do that one? But then the reaction gets over my face. No, let's just stick with the tried and true, shall we? Which is that one there. All right, team. Thank you for being a part of us if you're on board with Patreon, and want to highlight to you, bottom right-hand corner there, Jeremy Armstrong, who became a patron at 1 minute past 7 this evening. So Jeremy decided he'd jump on board as a patron. So lovely to have you on board, Jeremy. We like to highlight when people join us. What I'm really looking forward to doing is, I don't know, I reckon, and I mean, I'm not saying this is going to happen quickly, but I reckon another 5 to 10 patrons will have to force me to redesign this opening welcome. Because
graphics design is your passion. So
running out of the room.
I reckon you're looking forward to it.
Yeah. So if you're interested in being a part of what we do and who we are, you can come join the team and help us keep making #independent news. Visit www.patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Yeah, so thanks very much, team. And also remember what we say to you all the time, even if you can't or don't want to be a patron and, do $5 or $15 or $250 a month. The other ways you can support us is to be our advocates. You can put things out there for us. You can support what we do. You can show what we do. You can share our stuff. And the other thing that's happening more and more now, and we might even play a little bit of something tonight to show you this, is you're also giving us things. Like you're giving us leads and you're giving us stories, and then we're following them. I heard from Daniela on the Facebook page today, who sent me a clip of someone else's position on why Christopher Luxon is a hypocrite. You may agree or disagree with that, but we'll probably play that tonight should we have time. If we run out of time, we'll play it tomorrow. But it's a little bit like...
We have to play it. I love it. I love it so much.
The more you connect with us and either be our advocates to be a part of what we're doing or to feed us things. I mean, I know that we might get to some point at some stage that we might actually have a tip line or a tip email address or something. And yeah, we love hearing from you guys, and you guys help us make the show either through your Patreon, through your patronage, sharing our stuff around, or sometimes directly giving us information. We got one of those. Actually, should we do this now? Should we do the thing we threw out last night? And funnily enough, Jay, you might be surprised, but I heard nothing from anybody. So this is something that Chewy and I started talking about last night, if you went with us at the end of the show. It was kind of a stream of consciousness conversation, where we started talking about those policies, those transformative policies that everyone adheres to and holds on to now. Doesn't matter what it is. The people that the transformative policies that every government now has to support, because if they didn't, it would be enough of a reason not to get in. And we started to think about ones, and I thought of things like working for families, interest-free student loans, KiwiSaver. I said free healthcare. It turns out free healthcare is done twice: the Social Security Act and the General Medical Act. State housing was another one. There's a whole bunch of things in there, yeah. And when I kind of got to the end of just a few off the top of my head, I realized, gosh, they're all left-wing Labour Party sort of policies. And so we raised the question, name us some of those policies that are transformative to the country that every New Zealander wants and wants to keep, refuses to pass on or to give up because they're either desperately loved or desperately needed. And if any government got in left or right and tried to change them, then it would probably be something that wouldn't get them into politics. That's why John Key had to support interest-free student loans and working for families. There's no way he could get rid of it, right? So we put a bit of a challenge out there, which was, I wasn't arrogant enough to say, oh, there's no right-wing policies that ever do this, but I couldn't think of any. So we put out there a bit of a challenge to say, let us know the policies that are kind of these transformative society-wide policies that have been put in by a national government or by right-wing government, because before there was national, there was still right-wing politics. And there was a bit of toing and froing in the chat, and there was people saying, you know, you show me yours, I'll show you mine, to which we kind of said, no, you just show us yours because we've put out an example. And I said at the end of the show, quite arrogantly, I look forward to hearing from no one. And Chewy, we heard from no one. Other than this, right, I put out this tweet today, and it was basically the same thing, right? And I talk about what we talked about last night. I put some of the things off the cuff. I said this, what we realized is that all of these came in under a left/Labour government. When we started to ask what policies have been brought in by a right bloc government that citizens still hold on to as passionately, we couldn't think of any. There is an old adage that the left make policy and the right respond to policy. Is this true? Is the list above evidence for that? What I was wondering is if you could tag me with more policies that you think are now anchored in New Zealand society and loved by Kiwis, and especially if those policies have been brought in by a right bloc, I'd appreciate being educated. Now, some people might think that sounds a bit snarky, but it's actually true. Show me some of them. Because that doesn't negate that all of these ones have been brought in by the left. There might be some that have been brought in by the left, but I can't think of them. And it seems that in the last 24 hours, no one else has thought of any either. I'm still saying there might be some, but we haven't had it. Now,
yeah, I mean, I really tried to do it, and the only thing that I could come up with was something that doesn't really fit into all those categories, and that was think big.
Yeah, well,
think big. Definitely transformative for the country. Serious downsides, but it's also not something that you can go, well, we need to keep that. Yeah, I would argue that it's probably time to think about another period of thinking quite big for making this country more resilient, but that's a discussion for another day.
So one of the friends of the show, friends of ours actually as well, and someone who's somewhat responsible for the show because he's a local Dunedinite and his name's Jason, and you see him popping up sometimes in the chat as Neon Mammal, and he's kind of my technical guy. So anytime there's an error or an issue, I go, oh, Jason, help, and he helps me. He did a bit of research, and he did something really interesting. Here's this tweet, right? He says this: I've asked ChatGPT if it could give me a vague reform type answers for National, but for Labour was quickly and easily able to give me a specific list of actually things done to improve people's lives. I guess AI is a raving lefty. So he asked the question to ChatGPT, and this is the response for the national governments, plural, that came out. First of all, ChatGPT apologises, but these are the policies that have come out. Now remember what I said last night. The left make policy, the right respond to policy. So this is what ChatGPT came up with. Better public service. This policy is aimed to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of public services, with targets is set for reducing crime rates, increasing immunisation rates, and improving educational outcomes. So cuts, maybe. Welfare reform. That's a response. Education reform. Resource Management Act reform. Health sector reform. Tax cuts, infrastructure development, trade agreements, housing affordability, law and order. Lots of headline things, but nothing incredibly appropriate. Right now, this is ChatGPT, remember? Jason then asked the same question of Labour, and look what it says. Family package, Kiwi build, wellbeing budget, fair pay agreements, zero carbon act, healthy home standards, free early childhood education, mental health and addiction inquiries, increase in the minimum wage, Indigenous rights. Policy. I'm so stoked Jace did it and sent it to us. And then he says this, he went back and he goes, can you refine the list to show only policies that have social benefits? ChatGPT says, certainly. Here's a list of policies introduced by the National Party government in New Zealand that have social benefits. And again, reform, tax cuts, housing affordability, which is a general headline thing, no policy, and better public services. So I'm not saying ChatGPT is the be all and end all, but it was a really interesting experiment to say that ChatGPT couldn't find any either. That's probably a fair way of saying it, Chewy.
Yeah. And I mean, some of those, like, I skim read what it said there about health reforms, that the aim was to get better health outcomes. And I think here we are standing where we are. And there was massive underfunding of healthcare. And that's just dovetailed into what we have near underpaid nurses, rundown hospitals. And we had to deal with a global pandemic with that in our arsenal. So, there's a reason why I get so pissy about this stuff, because there's no long-term thinking. It's sugar hit policies. It is just, we're going to roll something back. We're going to give everybody a tax cut because that seems to be a winner, and we don't think more than 4 years ahead.
Yeah.
Whereas Labour seems to be, let's entrench something that is generational.
I just think it's hilarious as well that we've sort of been floating the idea is it true that the left make policy and the right respond? And even ChatGPT had reform. Now, that in and of itself means reforming other policy. And I guess it's saying reforming on some stages left-wing policy. Now, I mean, you could argue that there's bad policy and reforming that policy is a good thing, but still it seems to me, I'm more convinced now that the left make policy and the right respond to policy. So if you think about that across like all of the political spectrum, and you think about who do we want to follow, what government do we want to change this country, to move it forward, to progress it, you might say, where are those policies going to come from? It doesn't feel like those policies are going to come from the right. I don't want to be an absolutist and say they can't, but just looking what those things are that we hold on to now, I can't say have all because there's more research to do, but primarily seem to come from the left, not from the right. Yep. So why are we voting for the right? Is it because there is a sector of society who don't like the social changes or the progressive changes or the progression that the country has made? Because everyone who doesn't like it and doesn't want to vote for it still wants their free healthcare. If they're parents, they still want their working for families. You know what I'm saying? So they want them, but they don't want to vote for the party that's going to give them more of those kinds of transformative policies.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've seen this overseas, right? People don't necessarily vote for their own best interests. You have poor people in the States voting for Trump thinking that he's their man because he hates the same people that they hate.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a whole thing of like people that just don't like that Labour seems to look after people that aren't them, even when they are being looked after. Like there'll be a lot of people there that are receiving working for families and stuff like that don't consider themselves to be the beneficiary of a social program when they absolutely are.
Yeah.
It's that well, I'm not someone with my hand out. Yeah, but you are receiving something though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, talking about those policies, I think the healthy home standards are going to reap benefits for decades. Like that forced landlords to update their properties, not as fast as they probably should have, but they were certainly moving right at the finish line to get heat pumps and insulation into houses that should have had them decades ago.
Yeah.
So hopefully we see the benefits of that, of healthy kids and less asthma and all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, there's a couple of other little stories that are bubbling away under the surface that we might get to tonight if we've got time. That was sort of the first one. Let's get to this story, and this is going to flow into a conversation with Chris Cahill from the Police Association. Actually, before we do that, there are some people talking about what we just talked about. Should we do any messages first? Any live chats
absolutely.
first?
I'm just skimming through it now.
Just so we get like at the end of this bit, we don't bang them all up to the end of the show and then people have gone.
Yeah. Here's a whole lot of comments that are out of context now. Jeremy Miller back for the second night. Welcome, bud. You must have liked what you saw last night. National doesn't really care about the public sector because of all the interest they have in the private sector.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's really up for debate. There's money to be made, so let's get it out of the public public hands. Arrest JK here. Unfortunately, the Nats could be electable, and then they sell them. I think that's referring to a comment that Emma made about state housing and stuff like that. And we've seen that, the massive on-selling or bargain basement selling of state houses en masse, with none of them being replaced. And oops, we lost the election. Now Labor needs to fix it.
Yeah.
Nuclear free is mentioned. Nuclear free, although you could argue that the Longy government was somewhat right with old Roger. And yes, I've been reading a lot about the changes from Muldoon to that Labor government. And as much as I want to hate Muldoon, he did some stuff that we're reaping the benefits of now. I mentioned Think Big. Near bankrupted the country doing it. But I don't think we'd have any arguments that we would be in a worse place without those hydro dams and Marsden Point, even though that we've shut that down now.
Right.
And it forced Labor into a bunch of potentially very bad decisions, and listening to Roger Douglas was one of them.
This is such a strange one, isn't it? And I think it's unfortunate that the right can use Roger Douglas as a weapon against the left, because obviously if you go and leave Labor and go and form ACT, you were never really your perception was never really Labor. I mean, if you go from Labor to ACT, that means you're never really a genuine sort of centre lefty sort of a person. I mean, so I feel like that's this anomaly that's hanging around. You can't take it away from the criticism of what Labor did then under Rogernomics, but it feels like they hired a consultant from the right to be a part of their portfolio for a while, and that's what happened.
It feels like an infiltrator when you read about that time. He definitely didn't sound like the right person to have in the room. But again, we're looking back at this with like 2020 hindsight. We've seen decades of the fallout of that. And at that point, neoliberalism was this cool new theory that had the idea of a smaller, more agile government, and it was really going to inspire investment and that sort of thing. And all it was a bunch of capital rich people coming and picking apart all of our state-owned entities.
And look, people fell for it as well. I mean, we were talking to Philip Mills, last week from Les Mills, the founder and CEO of Les Mills. There's one of the group of people wealthy people who want to pay more tax. I mean, his Les Mills is worth $300 million, and I believe it's pretty clear, and it says in lots of business things that their percentage of that is worth over $200 million. So this is a proper wealthy person doing it. And even he said in our conversation that he fell for it in the 80s. So he's someone who's now totally trying to do really good work, really progressive work, sits on the left. I'm assuming, I don't know who he actually votes for, but, people fell for this in the 80s as well, because it seemed like the new thing to do. And it's only on reflection, like you say, 2020, that they realised, oh, fuck, we were had on some level.
Yep. Reaction to the mention of Douglas and Preble. Matthew here says the right has headlines and sound bites, the left has policies. Policies are hard to read and a bit boring compared to shareable headlines, and that's
especially in this day and age. Yeah, especially
we've got sound bites, no policies, no costings, because that stuff's boring. We'll put it out in a white paper that no one will read.
Yeah.
Like the noise tomorrow with the release of the budget is going to be spectacular. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this a bit later on, but ACT releasing their alternative budget, and everybody seems to miss the point where he raises taxes by 10% for 70% of the population.
And get rid. I haven't looked at it in too depth yet because it's tomorrow's job, and I think trying to get rid of 6 departments of government, including the Human Rights Commission or something.
Oh, we definitely don't need that. Who needs human rights?
Yeah,
just airy-fairy stuff.
Hey, let's move on, because there was a pretty scary story to come today out of Auckland. And the reason we're doing this, I don't know if we've got much commentary on this, because what can you really say, is this then flows into the conversation with the Police Association, because we talk about this in that conversation. And it's really worth hearing from the president of the Police Association, because one of the things he says unequivocally, and we talk about this case that we're about to show you the story on, is how the main reason for this gun registry is to stop the flow of guns to illegal, to the criminal element. That's the main reason for it. And obviously we don't know what's going on with this case, but even the president of the police association was like, "Oh, I wouldn't expect the gun that was fired this morning to be to a registered owner." Now, could this still have happened? Yes, of course it could have, but I encourage you to stick around to listen to that conversation in 5 or 6 minutes, because we unpack it quite a bit. And you know me, I love being the dumbest person in the room. So I talk to him like a 5-year-old and I get him to explain it all very, very well. So both Chewy and I can understand what he's talking about. So let's have a look at this story. This was headed an appalling display of violence. Teenage girl shot in road rage incident.
A police perimeter wrapped around this 24-hour service station. Inside, a flurry of activity. Sandringham residents heard the emergency sirens late last night, but only today discovered why they were near.
Around 10:11, I heard a police siren, but I didn't give much attention because we stay nearby the main road.
A 15-year-old girl had been shot while travelling inside a minivan with her family of 5. The vehicle stopped at this Z petrol station.
I believe
for help.
shot 3 times.
We are incredibly fortunate today that we are not dealing with a homicide investigation.
The incident began when a Mazda hatchback took exception to the family minivan while both vehicles were driving along a section of Auckland motorway. Police say the hatchback started driving aggressively.
Hard braking, which is when one vehicle gets in front of another vehicle and brakes hard, causing another...
Call that brake checking. That's what I would call that, to make that clear. Brake checking.
Other vehicle to take evasive action.
The situation escalated when the hatchback's occupants then fired a number of gunshots at the minivan, striking and seriously injuring the teenage girl who was sitting near the back, while another passenger suffered moderate injuries. Z Energy says it was the staff working here at the petrol station who first alerted emergency services to what had happened. Despite an ongoing police investigation, the petrol station was able to reopen early this morning, and Z Energy says its focus now is supporting its workers. Police say the incident appears to be a random attack and they want help locating the hatchback that fled the scene.
A 2009 grey Mazda Excella with the registration NGL15.
The teenage girl is in a stable condition and won't need surgery, but her whole family has been left to recover after a terrifying drive. Alice Wilkins, News Hub.
So, there's not a lot to talk about because we don't know the exact incidents, but I have to say, and sure you may, I think we've all experienced this before, and this is not victim blaming at all, but you don't engage with someone on the road who's aggressive, And I just got to think about the logic of it. If you're the minivan in the front and the car is following you that shoots at you, I don't know what happened and it's not their fault. Nothing should make that happen. But potentially I'm thinking of logically looking at it, it's going to be the minivan who has done the brake checking because they were following in that path. And I don't, again, I'm not saying anyone's brought anything upon themselves, but the thing about road rage, the thing about driving in general, especially driving on an open road at 100 k's an hour with cars all around you, you are already at a 9 out of 10 with your senses. So the reason that there's road rage is not because people innately are in that way inclined, but it's because we're already at this heightened stage just purely from driving. And it doesn't take much to put people over the edge. Not okay, not acceptable, no excuses. But there is a warning here that we don't engage, or if someone's being a lunatic, you just let them go and you don't have to make a point or prove a point at any stage. Look, and this is also not actually about this case because we don't know what happened, but avoid road rage at all times. Mea culpa, even if you're in the right. Apologize and put your hand up and let the lunatic keep on going. This is the extreme of the extreme versions of that, but it just made me think as well about all the times that people have had a crack at me on the road and you just kind of apologize and keep going even when they're in the wrong. I heard, and I can't say what it is because that's off the record, but I heard of an incident with a person, I won't even identify who or where, this week that got their push bike driven into on purpose by a road rager. Luckily they weren't on the push bike when they got driven into, but they got their push bike driven into as they were engaging with this person screaming at them. Now that's technically could be attack with a deadly weapon. It's not worth it. It's not worth engaging even when we're in the right. Not again. Yep. I want to make it clear. I'm not saying therefore they shouldn't have done. I'm just saying in a general thing for road rage, let the lunatics go, Chewy.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to keep that in mind at the moment. Absolutely. I want to highlight a couple of comments here. Bradley, what the hell is going on in this country? In my opinion, it's something that I've spoken about before. And in the last couple of years, just through what I've experienced in my workplace and stories like these, people get angrier, quicker over smaller stuff. Yeah. And I think it's just because we've been dealing with level of stress that we haven't had to deal with over the last previous to the last couple of years. And it's just made people a little bit hot. And it's hard to be constantly considerate or aware of what somebody else might be dealing with when you're dealing with the same thing.
Yeah.
So whatever this incident was in the road, who's to say who did something wrong first or reacted incorrectly first?
Completely.
Shit situation. And we're going to talk about what made that worse is someone had a fucking gun in the car, which is
100%.
just crazy. Time to fly is basically echoing me. The last 2 years of COVID and lockdown really seems to have broken something in society and brought out the worst. And it is. Anything like this, it'll get highlighted and we can all comment on it, and that's what we're here for. But very, very scary to think that someone decided to open fire on a minivan full of people on the open road at night because who knows, they got cut up or someone didn't indicate or something equally stupid that doesn't deserve a potential death sentence.
And that everybody does on a particular day sometimes. Oops, I accidentally cut you off. Or I pulled out into a gap where I probably shouldn't have, where we're all safe, but I acknowledge you had to put your foot on the brakes and I probably should have waited for you to go. We've all done it and we will all do it again. So yes, it's lunacy. It's utter, even just normal road rage lunacy for that issue. But I saw one on TikTok the other day, Chewy, people down here in down Castle Street. So people screaming at each other because someone didn't give someone enough room. And I'm just like, as you say, what heightens this to the next level is if one of those people had a gun, then what? And it's not just have a gun, because you're going to hear from Chris Cahill in a second talking about, and in fact, I've already put it on Twitter if you've seen my feed, talking about, every single day of the year, people are having guns pulled on them in this country. Right, it's happening every single day of the year. It's like it just doesn't get reported in the news, but because that's happening every single day of the year, it just makes me think that person's having a loose moment. I'll just let them go. You can go. Bless you, my brother. Off you go. Be angry with me, because I think I as much as I can, I try to think about the downstream effect of things, and what's the outcome I want, and the outcome I don't want is to be crashed into on purpose by someone, or get into a fist fight with someone, or in the worst case scenario, gun with someone, and because it seems more common, I guess the chances have gone up. And I guess this is a good chance to now move into our next conversation, because the Police Association are trying to stop as many people illegally having guns. And one of the ways they're doing it is with the gun registry that are actively pushing back against and say they're going to repeal. Do you want to, I don't want to cut the conversation short about this, Troy, before I move on, but do you want to wrap up with anything else before we go to Chris Cahill?
No, let's crack on.
All right, so this is Chris Cahill. I caught up with him this afternoon talking about the gun registry, what it's all about, and the pushback by ACT for the gun registry. Enjoy, and we will see you in about a quarter of an hour. We want to welcome to the show the Police Association President. It's Chris Cahill. Chris, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good to be here.
We've been talking about this. We talked about this last night to do with the gun registry and the policy put out by ACT that you guys, according to stuff.co.nz, have listed as an attack on Kiwi safety. Can you expand on that a little bit for me?
Yeah, well, I think the key for us is that we believe a gun registry will mean there's a lot better understanding of who has firearms, where they are, and are they secure. And that will then lead to more responsible control of them. The biggest issue we have is currently, once you buy a firearm, you do not have to retain that and be responsible for retaining it. So you can immediately pass that on to anyone. Or if it's stolen, you don't have to report it stolen, and there's in fact no record of if you have 1, 100 or any firearms.
Right.
And really what that's caused is the few unscrupulous firearms owners are on selling them or supplying them to criminals. And that's where criminals in New Zealand mainly obtain their firearms from.
So for clarity, a couple of things. The first thing is I've never purchased a firearm, but I would assume, like if you go to Gun City or something like that, there's some kind of quote unquote registry, because you probably have to fill in all your details to say you've purchased the gun. So there's some kind of traceable in that first purchase. But you're saying then to on sell it, it's the Wild West. You can do what you want. It can go where you want. You can sell it to whomever you want, which means, in theory, I guess, you could have a criminal element buy to order. They could get a law-abiding person with a license, etc., to buy it, and then they could just buy it off them. That's something that can happen now. That's the first part, just for clarity for me.
Yeah, very much so. So currently, if I go and purchase a firearm, the dealer will record that I purchased a firearm from him, but that won't be recorded anywhere else but in the dealer's records.
Yep.
So can you do what you just said? Very much so. So just recently we had the report from Napier of a guy called Kershaw Singh, who had 5 different, he wasn't a licensed firearms holder, he had 5 different licensed firearm owners purchase carbine-style rifles for him. Wow. He then cut them down and then on-sold them to gangs in Auckland, 21. And when you cut those down, they already have a pistol grip. So it looks exactly like a revolver handgun. So that's how easy it was. No record. He could do it, no problem at all.
And to just to continue on from that conversation about that path that I just put through about legally purchasing then on selling, you're saying that the research shows that is that the most common way a gang will get an illegal gun today is through someone buying it legally and then either on selling it or having their legal guns stolen? Is that, like when we talk about when the bad guys get the guns, is that the most common way that they get it?
Yeah, so police were lax, shall we say, in following up how when they recovered guns from criminals, where had they originated from? Right. And after 2019 massacre in Christchurch, they set up a firearms investigation team based in the National Organised Crime Group. And before that, I'd been saying most of them were stolen. But in fact, what they identified, when they could trace where a firearm came from, the vast majority were what we call straw purchasing. So purchased by a legitimate firearms owner and then on sold to a gang member or other criminal.
Okay. So how would the gun registry stop that, just to make sure everyone's fully informed as to why the police want it? And then we can get on to whatever ACT's doing. We'll do that in a sec though.
All right. Okay. So what a gun register, when I purchase a gun, it would then go on to the firearms registry. So I would then say if I'd purchased 10 firearms, it would show Chris Cahill has purchased 10 firearms. Police would then be able to go and check and say, can you show us your 10 firearms you've purchased? And if I didn't have those 10 firearms, I would have to explain where they are. But currently, I could purchase those 10 firearms. It's not registered my name. I never have to explain where those 10 firearms have gone to. So in other words, I now will be held responsible for my firearms.
So it's a way to, I guess, stop those few. And look, we talked about this last night, Chris. We don't need to get into the conversation around law-abiding citizens, because every law is written because a few people won't abide by them, not the vast majority. I don't need a law to say don't murder someone, right? I don't need that law for me, right? But there is a very, very slim percentage of people that we need a law for, so that there can be punitive punishment when that thing does happen. So that's every law. So we don't need to get into this conversation that ACT or whoever goes through, political parties go through, saying, but all those law-abiding, there's no law that's written for all the law-abiding people. It's always written for those who won't abide by the law. Sorry, you go.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, you 100% nail it. You know, we register cars, we register dogs. Nearly all car owners, nearly all dog owners are law-abiding citizens. That's not why we register. We register for the ones that don't.
Yeah. But this is going to, for those law-abiding citizens who are already doing the right thing, this is going to be like another layer of security to keep their guns, keep them accountable for their guns, and also help deter, perhaps, from people then doing the straw polling because of that accountability. Straw polling, straw selling, whatever the correct term is.
Yeah, straw selling. Yeah, exactly. It means now there's a way for police to identify someone who may be straw selling or straw purchasing. And look, the other side too, in Australia, when they introduced registries across the country, across all the states, and that was in response to the Port Arthur massacre,
Yep.
thefts dropped from 10,000 a year to 1,500. And the most obvious thing that was attributable for is firearms owners realised if a firearm was stolen, they would have to report that because now police would be able to say, where's your firearms? So they increased their security. They rather than leaving them back at the farm ute or in the farm shed, they locked them in the safes. So it increased security, which is much safer for firearm owners as well.
In the article from the weekend, you say that the Policy of ACT, who are saying they're going to repeal this law, is a, quote, failure of responsibility, end quote, and an attack on the safety of law-abiding New Zealanders. Can you unpack that a little bit for me? Yeah,
well, the reality is, if you do away with the look, it's worth having a bit of history. After the Aramoana massacre, we had a commission of inquiry led by Justice Thorpe, and all this legislation and a gun registry was recommended there as a key way to control and increase the responsibility of firearms. The gun lobby just pushed back so long that, to be honest, people forgot about Aramoana and the urgency didn't occur to happen. Now, after 2019, Labor government led by Jacinda Ardern at the time made it clear they weren't going to allow that to happen. And they pushed this through why people could remember why it would happen.
For sure.
So to now, 4 years down the track, we now have pushback saying we don't need this, ignores the reason which we actually brought it in. Just today, there's reports of a young girl being shot in Auckland in a drive-by shooting, a road rage shooting. Now that probably wasn't done by a licensed firearms owner, but where did the gun come from? That's the point we're making. We've got to restrict that supply, and a gun registry is the best way to restrict the supply. It won't be the only way. Then we'll have to look at issues like, will this increase importations, illegal importations, which we don't have any evidence. Police don't have any evidence that that's significant at the moment. And then also, the 3D printing of firearms will be something in the future. But you don't give up the biggest gain just because there'll be other things to deal with in the future.
Well, and also, unfortunately, and this is perhaps my political commentator side coming out now, Chris, rather than the interview with you, is that you don't make laws based on a hypothetical potential that might happen in the future. Because if you say we're going to stop this law because this thing might happen in the future, you could do that for literally any law on the books. You could find a hypothetical thing in the future that may or may not happen to cancel a law. So it's just lunacy. Speaking of lunacy, the ACT Party. ACT MP Nicole McKee, who is actually, or certainly has worked before as a gun lobbyist, and we've got all the places she worked for and looked for the rights of gun owners. How does the association feel about her in particular coming out pushing back against this, especially with the background of her being, pro-gun lobby? Does it feel a little bit like a former tobaccoist coming out against, smoke-free places in New Zealand?
Yeah, well, it does. Look, I can say I've met Nicole on numerous occasions, and I like her as a person, and I actually respect what she's done in Parliament. I think she's been pretty effective. And you might argue that, her role is to lobby for the people that she thinks voted her in. But I think they also have a responsibility to look beyond just what works for a small amount of New Zealand and works for everyone. And look, even when I talk to her, her argument, for instance, that a gun registry would create a shopping list for criminals,
for sure,
it doesn't really stack up when they support a gun registry for handguns and restricted weapons, which would be some of the most sought after weapons by criminals. And also, police have gone a hell of a long way, and they've briefed her on how this gun registry will work and the security around it. And okay, we will always admit everything's, under attack by hackers, etc. these days. But, police have gone very, put very good safety, nets in around that and security around that. And to be honest, if I wanted to know who had firearms, I'd probably tap into the local gun club websites or into your arms dealers' websites and shops, which won't have near as high a security. That'll tell me who's got guns quicker than this gun registry.
But the point you're making is a really, really wise one, that if part of their argument is if we have a gun registry, that's a shopping list for gun to spell it out. In other words, if someone got that information, they'd know where all the guns are. With ACT saying they still want, 2 lots of weapons, 2 classifications of weapons on a registry, it still does that. So it seems to me that when I think about it as an outsider looking in, that's the consummate example of politicking, that they're saying we don't want a gun registry because we don't want people to know where the guns are, but we'll have these guns on a gun registry so therefore people could find out where the guns are. That feels to me like the ultimate in politicking rather than good policy. You don't have to comment on that in your position, but that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, to me it lacks common sense, really. It lacks common, and I think it's really important to emphasise nothing in a gun registry stops gun owners having guns and having as many guns as the law allows them to have. Yeah. That's not what we're trying to do. I mean, I speak to lots of firearms owners, and most of the ones I speak to don't have an issue with their firearms registry. Some of them get a bit confused about what it might mean. Yeah. And I'm fully supportive of the need for firearms in New Zealand, both in a recreational sense and in a pest control sense. I mean, I talk to deer hunters about that, how deer are out of control in New Zealand. We need these people out there shooting deer. Sure. And nothing I do is to stop them. But we have to have the balance between that and safety. And as you said right at the start, this isn't for law-abiding people. This is for the criminals that might have gun licenses, a small number. No law is.
That's one of the stupidest things all politicians try and pull out there, that this will affect law-abiding. Well, it's not for them, it's for the others. One other question, though, about the MP McKee. She used the word competent, that the police wouldn't be competent when it came to holding this information. In other words, that the administration of the system wasn't up to, you guys went up to the task of it. How do you feel by someone who could be in government within 5 or 6 months, thinking that the police aren't competent to do this job?
Yeah, look, I was a bit insulted when she suggested we were putting incompetent officers into this work group. Yeah. Because that's, from what I've seen, we've actually got some amazing people working in there, and certainly some of the lead people I've dealt with are exceptional. But in fairness, the one thing also in fairness, a criticism the gun community has had for a long time is police have badly managed the administration of firearms. And that was identified in 2019 when there was a review. Police haven't put the resources in, they haven't put the expertise in the right areas. But since then, they have established this whole firearms safety team. It's got 400 or 500 staff it'll have when it's finally complete. And the firearms community will rightly get a much better service and a much more professional service. So perhaps she was just trying to say you haven't done a good job in the past, and that's a fair criticism. Right. But I think going forward, I have every confidence actually they're going to get an exceptional service.
Hey Chris, before you go, and you've already kind of referenced it once, the situation in the West Auckland or Auckland's Western Motorway today about a road rage incident where a car was following a minivan, and whatever happened, tempers flared, and the car behind shot at the car in front, injuring a teenage girl who's now in hospital in stable condition, we hear, which is great to hear. Is there anything else that you can tell us about this incident from the Police Association? Any information that's going out there that can inform our listeners as to what's happened with it, what's going on, what you guys know as of today?
Yeah, no, look, I can't really tell you a lot more than you know, except, I certainly know police have put a big team on this because they see, how dangerous it is. If you're willing to do something like that once, it could happen again. But without trying to scare people, I actually get so many reports from our members that don't make the news of firearm incidents. I would not be exaggerating to say, on average, I get a report a day of shots being fired or firearms presented across New Zealand, many in Auckland, but across New Zealand. It's much higher rate than people actually realise. I'm stunned how often houses are getting shot at in incidents, or people turning up at a hospital having been shot in gang retributions or things. It's fact the life of police officers now that they expect to deal with firearms whenever they go to work. And
just going full circle for my last question then, is do you think that the gun registry could actively change those stats, like with the hopefully the slowing down of having firearms through straw purchases go from legal gun owners through to perhaps criminal elements. Do you think that this is a literal tool? Do the police see this as a literal tool that could slow down some of those stats that you're talking about and impact it so we could have fewer interactions with guns in New Zealand in the future?
Yeah, very much so. That to me is the key. If it has got the ability to choke off the main supply of firearms to criminals. And that's why I support it so much. It's not an administration tool. It's to stop the flow of illegal firearms to criminals. And then, as I said right at the start, then we have to look at the other risks. Will that mean that they'll try and import them illegally more? Will they print them more? But, so then you have to, adapt to what criminals work. But at the moment, there's no need to print them, no need to illegally import them, because you just get someone to buy them for you.
Very good. Well, not very good. So that came across well. Very good meant thank you, very good for the conversation. Not very good. That was very scary what you just said. That wasn't very good. You know what I mean. Chris Cahill is the Police Association President. Thank you for your time today. We really appreciate you fleshing this out a bit more for us, Chris.
Thanks very much, Pat. Appreciate the opportunity.
Not very good. Just wanted to clear that up.
That was such a smooth end.
Thanks, man. I was practicing that the whole time, making sure I could nail that one down. This is the thing that I find most interesting about that. And I've been watching a bit of the chat, but whatever. What he says is that the easiest, most common way for criminal elements to get guns is for people to buy them legally. There is some form of registered ownership then, but then those people who buy them can on-sell them with no registration for the next person. So that is the part. That is the gap that it fills. So last night the conversation and the common refrain seems to be, but criminals, they won't abide by these rules anyway. Yeah. It's like if you drink and drive, it's people who are still going to drink and drive, they're not going to abide by the rules. Doesn't mean you don't have drink driving laws in place. But what it means is that law-abiding people now may think twice about on-selling, or they might double-check before on-selling, or they might insist that now you have to on-sell with a registration. So what are your details? I'm not going to give you my details, or I can't sell you that gun. And that's the flow that it's that the police are saying, not even we're saying, the police are saying it'll stem that flow of legally bought guns getting into illegal hands. It'll also stem the flow on some level of guns being stolen, because if you're now more accountable for these guns, you don't have to, I was shocked, you don't have to inform anybody if you have a gun stolen. Whereas if it's registered, it's basically your responsibility now, and they're forcing it to be your responsibility. So therefore, rather than being flippant about it, and I'm not saying this is all gun overs, it's probably not even many gun owners, but being flippant about where your guns are, you'll probably be more likely to lock them away and keep them safer, because if someone nicks them, the police are going to go, what the fuck, how do they nick it? Where's your gun safe? So it's not just about, it's actually not even at all about the criminal element and what they're going to do, because they're always going to do criminal stuff. It's about locking down legally owned guns and making them more difficult to go through to the criminal elements. So that's me, Chewy.
Do you want to see the weapon that has prompted this whole discussion?
Yeah, that was the thing that
he spoke about.
You cut it down and it looked like a handgun or something?
Yeah. So I want to put this up because every gun owner I've showed this to has gone, that thing has one purpose, and that has been to cut it down. That's the only reason it exists.
Oh, you mean you're designing it to be cut down?
Look at that.
Oh, yeah, it just looks like a handgun in the middle.
Yeah. Now the comment is, the Alpha carbines are a ludicrous clown gun that is worse for every single task than an equivalent rifle, and usually more expensive. I checked; they go for about $3,500. You can literally see.
I can literally see where the cuts would be, just behind the handle and just at the base of that wooden front handle bit.
Yeah, they are inaccurate and unpleasant to fire. But they're double action, so they replicate the performance of a semi-auto with a small magazine. So then they come underneath that law of having a different category license for a semi-automatic. So that's what they're there to flout a law, and then somebody goes, look at that. Maybe I could do this.
I was going to say. So that's the same gun?
That is the same gun cut down.
Far
Now,
out.
to have the correct license to have a big pistol like that, you have to get a different firearms license, and it's quite difficult to get hold of. Pistol licenses are some of the most difficult ones out there. But to get a rifle or a carbine, like we saw in the original picture, easy license.
Wow.
So in my mind, the whole purpose of those weapons was to get around a law. Somebody's seen that, has found another way to get around it, and just sell them to gangs and make some quick cash. That is what happened.
Terrifying. All right. Is there anything in the chat you want to put up before we move on from this conversation that happened during that interview?
Chat has been flying pretty quickly. We've got Mr. Kooky Nick in the chat. Now, Kooky Nick is a gun owner. And he's actually the man I referenced yesterday as someone that looked at his gun ownership after the Christchurch shooting and made a decision. So he says, we already have a registry for Cat B, E, and C style firearms. Every firearm in this category has its serial number recorded. So like this, and the fact that the gun sellers keep their sales records, because of course they do.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like we're halfway there.
Well, I mean, if you were to buy a car off me, Chewy, like let's say I buy a brand new car, electric car, thanks to our Patreons, and then I was to sell that car to you, you would have to fill out the new ownership papers. There would be a record of the car going from me to you. But at the moment, there doesn't need to be any record of my shotgun going from me to you. That's the part. And the thing that was beautiful in that conversation, is that, as Kooky has said there is a registry already of certain firearms, which means the ACT argument about it'll just be a steal to order document is moot. Because if there's already a registry for the weapons that would be most attractive to a gang member, i.e. handguns, then that steal to order registry already exists. So if it already exists, ACT can't use, we don't want a registry because it will become a steal to order. There is already a registry, therefore there is already a quote-unquote steal to order, so it's a moot point. It's null and void.
The other answer to that is like with anything, you kind of want different layers of defense, right? So I think the next part of it, and then why there's such a dollar value attached to it, is if you're going to create a central registry, then it must be secure. And that's a technology question, right?
Right.
So it's got to be easy for the gun sellers and the gun owners to upload their details and keep the registry active. It's got to be secure so bad actors can't get into it. But say they do get into it, a responsible gun owner should have their weapons locked in a safe as well. That's part of the existing laws, is that you must secure them and that sort of thing. Again, I know from my gun owner friends, after the Christchurch shootings, the police put a huge effort in and probably a belated effort in going around gun owners and going, show me where you keep your guns. Are they in a safe, or do you just keep it on top of the fridge? That sort of thing. So yeah, we're kind of already there. And this whole thing of a steal to order list, we're talking about registry, we're talking about registering cars and that sort of thing. Cars are very stealable, they're very desirable, they're very convertible. You could get a list of who owns a Lamborghini and where he lives. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the same thing. You can't walk into a school with a Lamborghini. But yeah. All of these things are answers, and I'm sorry, but somebody could get around it, or this could happen, is not an argument to stop it. It's a problem to be solved to get the goal that we want, which is to close a pipeline of illegal, untraceable weapons.
Yeah, and like we've said several times, you don't repeal legislation because of a possibility that might happen in the future. If you start doing that, every law can be out the window. I like what Fumiko said, or Fumiko. Basically, it's trying to keep some of the legal firearms owners honest. Yeah, sure. And that's not even suggesting that they're all dishonest now. But there'll be people who absolutely abide by the law. There'll be people who are pretty good. There'll be people who are like, oh yeah, whatever, I'm pretty relaxed about the whole thing. And then there'll be the criminal element. And for some of those legally owned guns, like the relaxed, chilled out ones, maybe this will make them be a bit more secure. And that's not a bad thing.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely. I got another comment from Sunset here, who probably has some gun owner friends as well. Experienced gun handling hunters that I know are alarmed by the types of guns on sale at the likes of Gun City. They reckon these guns are dodgy as, no good for hunting, etc. And I think that's exactly what the weapon we just looked at comes under.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hey, let's follow up on a story from last night. It's a story that's going all around New Zealand at the moment, and it's fairly terrifying. If you haven't heard yet so far, I'm sure you have, but the police are treating the Wellington hostel fire as arson, not as an accident, but as a criminal activity. I wanted to bring this up again tonight because I think, Chewy, it makes me sit back and go, what we said last night, do we need to amend it any? Let's listen to the story first and then reflect on our thoughts.
This blackened building where 6 people perished is now the scene of a homicide and arson investigation.
The scene examination will be extensive and methodical, and we expect it to take some time, likely several days, given the large size of the building. However, I can confirm that we are treating the fire as arson.
It was set alight deliberately. I'm 100% certain.
Police confirming a couch fire occurred at Loafers Lodge around 10:30 p.m. on Monday, roughly 2 hours before firefighters were called to the fatal blaze, but not yet confirming if the 2 fires are linked.
Are you investigating claims an earlier couch fire reignited, and what do you know about those claims?
As I said earlier, we are treating it as an arson. I'm not prepared to say why or the reasons for us treating it as an arson, other than to say that we are.
Residents have told One News fire alarms frequently went off at the lodge.
Someone smoking in the bedroom or whatever, and they set the alarm off. And it happens not nightly, but it happens on a regular basis.
Another saying this led the manager to set up an arrangement where fire trucks would only come if they were called directly. Fire and Emergency New Zealand declined an interview, saying in a statement FENZ doesn't enter into agreements of this nature.
Yeah, so to be clear, that's denied by the fire service. The residents are claiming that the fire guys only come out when they're called. The fire department or whoever the official say no, we don't do that kind of thing. So we're completely clear on that, what the fire department's saying.
I'm the director of the company. The day-to-day running of the business is done with the management team. I couldn't comment on any of that.
The Mayor can't say if other similar dwellings in the capital are up to scratch. She's asked staff to review this, as well as how buildings are assessed.
But that's the question, isn't it? Are up to scratch? According to an inspection, this was up to scratch. Isn't the whole point saying that what you're up to scratch is not up to scratch? So, I mean, that implies that maybe this wasn't up to scratch. If it wasn't up to scratch, why did it pass the inspections? Or it was up to what you classify as scratch, and what we're saying is your scratch needs to be changed. Yep. Because according to the rules, this was up to scratch, as far as we know.
I will be able to give some assurance once our officers can complete that big piece of work. That is a top priority.
The Prime Minister's asked the Housing Minister to investigate if broader changes are needed.
I think what we will be looking at closely is just the building regulations around higher density accommodation like a hostel environment.
The Prime Minister knew one of the people that are still missing, Liam Hockings. Protesting alongside him as student activists.
My thoughts are with Liam's family and his extended family. I haven't seen a lot of him in recent years, although I have run into him in various events around the place.
Another long night waiting for answers for family and friends.
And Kate's with us.
There you go. That's the story so far, Chewy. So last night we were pretty grumpy about the whole thing, but I think on reflection that our grumpiness was kind of about that up to scratch thing. Like, what is it okay, and what does the bylaw say is all right for people to live in? And the big thing is, of course, it's okay to live in a building like this with no sprinklers. So I don't think, and obviously
the sprinklers are my issue.
It changes the story, whether this was an accident or an arson. It changes the story as to culpability. But I don't think, for me, it changes the conversation we had last night about what are these people taking $1 million a year, and that's the number we've sort of estimated, in rent from vulnerable people, then not providing as good a location for these vulnerable people to protect them. So I don't think that conversation's changed at all, in my opinion, Chewy.
No, not at all. However that fire started, if that building had had sprinklers, then more people would have got out.
Yeah.
It would have kept the smoke down. It would have kept the fire in a location. It's easier to activate a fire alarm than a sprinkler system. Sprinkler systems really kick in when there is legit no shit fire.
Yeah.
Alarms are annoying. They're meant to wake you up and get your attention. But sprinklers, you absolutely have your attention because you're all wet now.
Yeah, so you burn your toast, the smoke alarm can go off, but it needs to be flames to break those little glass things, heat to break those little glass things to allow the sprinkler thing to go off. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah, the idea that a multi-story accommodation building where people were cooking and sleeping and stuff like that had no sprinkler system baffles me.
Yeah,
that seems to be something that you would think is a bare minimum.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, we're going to keep tracking because we do have another story to get to, and maybe a final one with that TikTok we talked about earlier today about Christopher Luxon. The question of the day is, if New Zealand have an appetite for a wealth tax, why the fuck is not the government instigating a wealth tax? Newshub and Reid Research, what they're doing at the moment is they do a series of polls. They do polling, scientific polling, and then they release it over the week, which is, I think, quite a clever way of doing it for the media because you go back to them every night. Tonight, along with some information around the upcoming budget, they released their information from their polling, their recent polling, about wealth tax and what New Zealanders think of that.
Unveiling his pride and joy budget 2023.
The title, as you'll see, is Support for Today, Building for Tomorrow.
And boy, anticipation is building for tomorrow, Grant Robertson's sixth budget.
A balance between making sure we support people with the cost of living pressures that they are facing right now, but also look to a future where we continue to build New Zealand as a nation.
Hot off the printers, so begins the annual guessing game of what's in and what's out.
There a major surprise in there?
No, I don't think there is.
Including no major tax changes.
There are not going to be major tax changes in the budget tomorrow.
Well, I think there's got to be income relief for New Zealanders because anything less than that will be a total failure of a budget.
A group of wealthy Kiwis, including Rob Campbell, last week called on the government to tax them more.
There are different types of wealth or capital gains or other taxes. I'm not really fussy about what they do as long as the end outcome of it is that people who have more wealth can pay more tax and do pay more tax.
We've been very clear that there won't be a wealth tax in the budget tomorrow, but debate around how we get a fair and progressive tax system is important.
Though Kiwis don't back the call to rule it out, we asked in our latest Newshub Reid Research poll, would you support the government introducing a wealth tax? A clear majority, 53.1%, said yes, while just 34.7% opposed it.
Now, that's all they say about the research. I don't know whether, again, we don't want to be too harsh on the narrative that this particular journalist wants to put out there, but that's just skipped over and that's it. So I've paused it. And I want to ask you, Chewy, what do you think? If there is an appetite from New Zealanders for a wealth tax, why does this left-wing government seem too scared? I mean, it looks like in the polls it would be a winner. Why are they too scared to introduce a wealth tax?
In my opinion, it's because they know that it's going to be something that National whack them around the head with. But we've discussed this. You can argue, you can answer that. You can go, we've come through all of this stuff. And there's so much that needs money. And we're either just going to make deep, deep cuts like you guys want to, or we can fund it and we can do it all. And I just think when you've got that sort of response from people that can see an obvious need and can see the evidence based on their IRD report, you've got people talking about, we've been talking about capital gains tax for ages. There's an appetite for it if it's targeted correctly and we can see the benefits of it. Just do it. Because if you don't campaign on it and you get in, well, then we're just going to repeat the cycle again. Bite the bullet. Do it.
Well, I guess that's the other thing, and JK has brought this up, although they promised no new taxes, but they could run it at the election. definitely disagree with this idea about because they promise something, they have to stand by it. Like, they didn't promise anything around COVID because they didn't know about COVID. If, for example, they make a declaration what's going to happen in the next 3 years based on the books, and then there's a global financial crisis, they might have to go back on some of the things they've promised. I think, like I was thinking about this the other day. Imagine if I was like, I'm never going to leave Dunedin, but then I got the perfect job opportunity in Auckland, and the reason I turned it down was because I made the promise to never leave Dunedin. Of course I wouldn't. I'd change my perspective and I'd reassess what was put in front of me to make a new decision, which is why these whole will you promise to never is such bullshit politics, and politicians get trapped into it by the media, and it's stupid. But in saying that, yes, they've now got somewhat of an indication that this is palatable to New Zealand, so much so that it could be a vote winner rather than National smashing them over the head with it. In fact, if they do, they might find pushback against National. National has pushed back against this in the past. Let's play the last 60 seconds of the story.
I'm interested in the results of your poll.
For the wealthy are in a position to pay more tax. It's that simple.
National went hard on a wealth tax at the last election.
Do you want a wealth tax? No!
Jacinda Ardern took it off the table, but she's gone, and this poll shows voters want it.
Does it give you mandate to have it as an election policy?
Well, the Labor Party hasn't set its election policy yet, but this is a discussion that I think is important.
Tax talk is back.
Definitely in the election campaign, I expect that tax will be a significant issue.
But first budget day, tomorrow.
Happy Budget Eve.
One more sleep.
I'll tell you something funny. That picture where he's holding the sign, that one there, where he's holding it up. Reports say he was so nervous about leaking information. This is actually last year's budget with this year's budget cover wrapped around it.
Yeah.
So they're so nervous about it getting out early, because there's probably information in that document, in the actual document, that will change, the stock exchange. That could, what I'm saying? It could make financial differences. So they're so concerned about it. They wrapped this year's budget cover around last year's budget just to make sure that they weren't going to, leave it on a bus or some shit like that. I don't know, Chewy. So a little tidbit for you.
Look, in my opinion, they need to lean over to the Greens and copy their homework. I think the Greens policy, which I'll paraphrase, but I saw that clip of Chloe Schwabrick explaining it in an interview with David Seymour. David Seymour, as she was explaining it, looked like he was trying to swallow an entire lemon whole. But the Greens policy was for people that had an income of over $150,000 a year, there would be a 1% tax, wealth tax. On that income.
So for context, I know people are smart out there. That's 1 cent extra in every dollar you earn over $150,000. 1 cent in every dollar. So if you earn $1,000 more, if you earn $151,000, then you're paying 1,000 cents. What's 1,000 cents? $10? Is it $10? I think it is.
Yeah.
So for every $1,000 more, it's $10 more.
I mean, the argument. If someone comes and says, "Hey, Labor's coming for your money," they go, "Do you earn over 150,000 a year?" Because we know how many people earn 150,000. There's not that many of you. Everybody below that is not going to affect you. But actors, the ACT, who may be the kingmaker on the right, are saying that tax should go up for 70% of New Zealanders, close to 10% across the board. So they don't have to increase taxes for the wealthy.
We'll have a look at that tomorrow night.
That's their angle.
Yeah, we'll have a look at that tomorrow night, I think. The other thing is, I completely forgot what I was going to say. Because I was looking deep into your eyes, Chewy, and thinking how amazing it looks.
Stop it.
All right, let's have a look at one last thing before we go. It's a shorty, but this is something that Christopher Luxon put out, I think, today. 17th of May. Yeah, that is today because my dad's birthday tomorrow. So it's 17th of May. This is a video that our hairless leader put out today. I'll play it for you, and then I'm going to play your response, which ironically came out yesterday.
One of the most outrageous things I think that happened this week was that Chris Hipkins was asked by media what was government spending last year, and he couldn't answer it. And I think that is outrageous.
Important to know that if you can't answer what something's costing, it's outrageous. should we bring to his attention being asked about how much these receipts would cost, and he had no idea? This is not what we're going to go on with, but if the yardstick or the metric that Mr. Luxon is putting out there is if you don't know the costing, it's outrageous. We need to remember that for when Mr. Luxon doesn't know the costing, which is not uncommon.
Because here's the number. The number is $129 billion. He thinks of taxpayers as a bottomless ATM machine to fuel his addiction to spending. Under National, under my leadership, it's going to be different. I'm going to send you a taxpayer receipt that says exactly where your money goes.
Good
because
God.
you're the taxpayer. It's not the government's money, it's your money.
He's
and I
so
want you to know
pleased
where
with
it's
this
going
as
to be
well.
spent on.
This
National is going to
dumb
make sure
policy.
we end the wasteful spending. We're going to make sure we kickstart the economy, and we are going to get New Zealand back on track.
After we talked last night, and I think we did a pretty damn good job of pointing out the ridiculously stupid idea about these tax receipts, which seems to be universally panned today. I now want to go, we said last night, I want to actually figure out how that conversation went from green light thinking to let's this is a good policy. Now I want to know, how did it go from a policy yesterday that got universally panned to we better make sure we double down on that 24 hours later? That's the next thing I want to know now, because that's what they've done. Bizarre.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
The first chance he had to shut up was before. The next best chance he's got is right now. He's chosen not to do that. Sort of as a segue to this, and as terrible poll results. Have you seen what was commented on News Talk ZB with our favourite? Don't play the clip.
Oh, shall I get the laugh? Is that what we're going to say?
Don't.
Okay.
But anyway, it was a conversation with the Wicked Witch of the West that apparently Auckland business leaders met with Nicola Willis and basically said, you need to roll this guy.
Ooh.
Yes. Now, obviously, News Talk ZB is a hive of leftist behaviour. So maybe there's some truth in it. Nobody's copped to that, by the way. Nobody said, yes, I was at that meeting. But interesting.
I also heard, where did I hear yesterday? You may not know the name Tane Randall, former All Black captain, Otago captain.
Yes, I am aware of him, but for a different reason. He used to own the Central Park video game store in Dunedin back in the day. Didn't know anything about video games. I've
heard a rumour out there that he is going to be a Labour, running for Labour in the Māori seat that Mika Whaitari is going for, and she's going to lose. It's an interesting rumour that I've heard. Every time I think about rumours, they always make me laugh.
You bastard!
I'm going to stop it. I'll stop it. I won't let it go.
Why would you do that?
So Daniela messaged us today, and she messaged us before that came out, and she wanted to let us know about a TikTok, which I think is something that young people do.
I love this.
And
I love it.
This is what it is. I'm just going to play it. It's a couple of minutes long, but just remember this idea of wasteful spending.
This is our sloth bucket for tonight, isn't it?
This is our sloth bucket for tonight. I'll just play it for you and I'll let that sit and then we'll wrap up for the night.
Kia ora, my fellow hard-working taxpayers. This is a comment Christopher Luxon posted on his Facebook page on the 16th of May 2023. And I am going to go through a tiny portion of how Christopher Luxon is a hypocritical and terrible candidate for the Prime Minister of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Yesterday, he told the country he was going to give the taxpayers receipts on taxpayer spend. What Luxon apparently doesn't know is that we can look at those receipts anytime we like because they are already available. For the period the 1st of January through to the 31st of December 2022, the National Party spent more taxpayer money on travel and accommodation costs than any other party.
God
and
damn.
if you combine the total travel and accommodation costs of ACT, Labour, Te Pati Māori and the Greens, the National Party still spent more on travel and accommodation. Within these...
Now, let me say this. In general, I don't care so much about this sort of thing in general. It's a bit like when we talked about Stephen Crowder's divorce the other day. The difference is when someone stands up and says waste, too much spending, they're too wasteful, they're spending too much, they're using your money like an ATM, and they're proven to be some of the people spending the most money, then it's news. Like I remember, I think it might have been Hone Harawira used to spend the most on travel because his electorate was the biggest. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course that makes sense. So you could use that as a criticism about this person using too much travel money, but it was because he had the biggest electorate in the country, something like that. So in general, it's not something that I think is worth getting into. Unless you're someone who's basically going, we are going to be the austerity party. We are going to be the ones that don't waste public money. The other ones are the ones that do it. And it appears that there are some areas, very small in comparison to the overall budget, couple of $1 million, but you can't have it both ways. You can't accuse the others of being wasteful and spending too much money when you're spending the most. That's when it's news, Chewy, and that's when it's worth bringing attention to it.
These costs is a line item called VIP transport. This cost specifically relates to Christopher Luxon as he is the only one in the National Party using it. In 2022, Luxon spent around $41,000. The total cost of VIP transport for every other party combined is $3,298. Luxon is using your taxpayer money as much as he possibly can, because according to him, it's okay when he spends it for his own gain.
The Mallard, do you know about this? The parliamentary trip to Europe?
The parliamentary trip, yep.
So have you allowed this to happen? Like, did Judith come to you and say, can I go on this European junket?
No. What happens is every year there's what's called a speaker's tour or a speaker's trip. In this case, they're going to Europe. We're trying to do an EU free trade agreement with the Europeans at the moment.
Yeah. Why is this a good idea? I mean, okay, here's the basic question, because you mentioned the EU free trade deal. Would the EU free trade deal still happen if this trip didn't?
Well, what I'd say to you is it's really important agriculture is going to be a big part of it.
Do you know how much it's going to cost?
I don't know, but I'll just say to you, look,
is now the time?
Hang on, I don't know. Outrageous. You don't know the cost. Outrageous.
It's
cost of living crisis.
I hear you.
Well,
the bottom line is fundamentally, I don't think it's a bad thing. But
here's the big issue. The big issue is that it's not the government's money, it's your money, it's the taxpayers' money.
There you go. So
stop spending my money on cars.
Daniela sent that through to us, and I thought it was worth bringing to your attention, showing to you what some people out there are doing. This is what I'm saying. You feed us stuff, baby birds, and we'll pass it on to the others. So it is very interesting that all the political parties together using VIP transport is about $3,000 to $4,000. Luxon by himself is $40,000. Now, again, if someone came to me and they said, this budget that Labor's put out is $40,000 of waste, I'd go, are you serious? Our GDP is $250 billion a year. $40,000? Are you kidding me? And I would generally say the same, other than when you're accusing the other side of using public money like an ATM, and you seem to be doing it on some level as well. That's the story. The story is not so much about the actual spending, because it's minuscule in the overall picture, but it is about, do as I say, not as I do, Chewy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, politicians need to travel around, especially in an election year, but they've obviously spent a lot of money making sure that people know who Luxon is. And I would say that is an outstandingly poor return on investment, because we need to work that out. What do we convert money into percentage points of likability?
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
It's
like
costing
a
them.
Cost of customer. That's what business calls. What is your customer acquisition cost? What's your voting acquisition cost? It would be pretty high, it would appear, from that kind of money you're spending.
Put him in front of, the worse their poll results get.
Oh, Chewy, it just makes me, every time I see some hypocrisy, it just makes me laugh. I just laugh.
You went to Fiji.
It just makes me laugh.
We don't know if Luxon went to Fiji, by the way. He usually goes to Hawaii.
Yeah, and true. And yes, Spiderhoof can completely, and Daniela for sending it through to us. So there you go. Very, very cool. All right. Hey guys, it's been a good one. Thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate you being with us. Of course, it's budget day tomorrow. I don't know whether
big day tomorrow.
Big day tomorrow.
Gonna have to wear the swag hat. This is the budget.
I don't know whether we'll have a guest on to talk about it or not. We'll wait and see. Budget happens. Is it like 3 o'clock, something like that? 1 o'clock, something like that. So I don't know. We'll figure it out and see what's coming of it. I got to tell you though, it's not going to. I don't think there's going to be a lot of news, because they're already talking about it being sort of a milquetoast, my words, sort of a budget. But I think that we need to be aware that it will be a safe budget. There won't be very much in it. And I think what you'll find is if the polls keep telling the politicians, 2 p.m, thanks, Free Soul. If the polls keep telling our politicians we want this tax or that tax, I think what you're more likely to see is that being an election promise. Because you know what? It's a little bit like our constant conversation around National saying to Labor, the CEOs don't like you. The response should be, as we always say, good, we'll stick with the factory floor workers. If they introduce a wealth tax, and National start pushing them and hammering them for that, the answer is, yeah, but we're going with the majority of New Zealand who want it. You guys can stick with your 2% of people who don't want it. They can be your voters. They're never going to vote for us, but the rest of New Zealand's going to get a benefit from it. You know, just, it's a little bit like Chewy. I was thinking, if you're going to be beaten in an election, I'd rather go out in flames than sort of mealy-mouthed kind of trying to be a jack of all trades but master of none. I'd rather go down in flames. So I hope that maybe after the budget tomorrow, for the next sort of 150 days up to the election, we see a bit of gumption and a bit of inspiration from this left-wing government, who, as we've showed tonight and will continue to show, seems to be the left that transformative ideas come from and the right seem to respond. So I would challenge Labor, if they want to get in again, to have some balls, get transformative, bring some big ideas out there. And if you go down with big ideas, I play a fair bit of poker and I watch a lot of poker online. Sometimes when you have a very good hand, there's a thing called a bad beat. If I've got a very good hand, but you've got a better hand, sometimes you get to the end of a tournament and you're like, man, I've got aces. You might have trips, I don't know, but I've got aces. If I'm going to go out, I might as well go out on this very good hand, even if I lose. I kind of feel a bit the same. You might as well go out on a very good hand, trying something transformative, than kind of just fading away into the distance, trying to be a jack of all trades and try and please everybody. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I know it's unlikely to happen, but right in my heart, I still hope tomorrow's budget is going to be Grant Robertson from the top rope with a steel chair. The steel chair being a wealth tax. But we'll see. I'm generally a big fan of Grant Robertson. It won't be.
No,
but
it won't be
still.
But it could still be for the election.
Just Grant Robertson, top rope, steel chair. Oh, Luxon never saw it coming. Bang!
All right. Look,
declare victory.
There's already
shake
requests.
Up the champagne.
Don't want to miss the swag hat. Should be home by 9:30. So there you
There's
go.
enough swag hat for everybody.
Enough swag hat.
Man, I've even got a gold chain somewhere, I think.
Is that what's going to be tomorrow? What should I do? I don't know. I'll find something.
You could take the alternative point of view and just have a bucket of gruel.
Shall I wear my suit tomorrow night?
Please,
wear
sir,
suits?
Can I have some more?
All right, team. Well, we'll catch you tomorrow night for the last one of the week. Actually, we're both in Auckland this weekend. That's kind of crazy, eh? So yep. We're in Auckland this weekend, not together.
I don't think I've been in Auckland since the before times, pre-COVID.
Really? I think I was up there not that long ago. I can't remember. October. I was up there in October. And now I'm back up now. My dad's birthday tomorrow, 83. Happy birthday, Dad. If you're listening, which you're not, you never do, because you can't. Doesn't know how to work YouTube. But happy birthday anyway, Dad. He's 83 tomorrow, so we're going to popping up this weekend to see him and say good day. And that's why I'll be up there. So yeah. Friends and whānau, we'll see you this weekend up in Auckland. Other than that, we'll see the rest of you back here tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for a budget edition. It's Budget Hearing News. That's what it is. BHN. Budget Hearing News tomorrow night.
Need to change the logo.
No, I have to change it at all. Catch you tomorrow, team. We'll be safe. Want to see you all here at 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.